Millionaire humiliates poor girl for buying a useless horse. A millionaire humiliates a poor girl for buying a useless horse, but he didn't expect that it would be the beginning of his greatest embarrassment. The girl appeared with a bag of hard-earned coins and took away the animal that everyone treated like trash. Days later, rumors surfaced that the horse had a hidden past, and a dirty truth came to light. Now, in front of the entire country, the girl threatens to bring down the name it spent decades building. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun was barely rising on the horizon when Emily held tightly to the cloth bag that kept her treasures. Each coin inside represented entire days selling flowers in the central square under the scorching heat or the light rain that insisted on falling on her uncovered head. Her small fingers knew the exact weight of that money, earned penny by penny during months of hard work. The 7-year-old girl walked barefoot along the dirt road, her brown eyes fixed on the golden gates that rose majestically in front of her. Hope Stables was known throughout the region for its champion horses and wealthy owners. For a child like Emily, daughter of a family that could barely put food on the table every day, that place seemed to belong to another world. But yesterday had changed everything. Emily still felt her heart tighten remembering the scene she had witnessed. A thin horse, with dark coat and sad eyes, visibly limping while being roughly pulled by one of the stable's employees. The animal had stumbled, and instead of help, it received shouts and pushes. At that moment, something inside the girl's chest broke and recomposed itself in a different way. All night long, Emily couldn't sleep. She saw the horse in her thoughts, felt the pain of that being that nobody seemed to want to protect. It was as if she recognized in that creature something very familiar, the same feeling of abandonment that sometimes visited her when money ran out at home and her stomach growled empty. Now, standing before the imposing gates, the courage that had brought her here faltered for a moment. Her bare feet contrasted with the polished asphalt of the entrance, and her simple dress, mended by her mother with so much care, seemed even more modest under the daylight. But the bag of coins in her hands weighed more than any insecurity. Uniformed employee observed her with curiosity as she approached the smaller gate, intended for pedestrians. Emily took a deep breath and spoke with the firmest voice she could find. "Good morning, sir. I would like to speak with the owner of the stables, please." The man laughed, a sound that echoed unpleasantly in the morning air. "Child, this is no place for games. Mr. Harrison is in an important meeting. Go back home." But Emily didn't move. She held the bag more tightly and raised her chin. "It's not a game, sir. I have money, and I want to buy a horse." The employee's expression changed, between amusement and disbelief. Other workers began to approach, attracted by the unusual situation. Whispers and low giggles spread through the group, but Emily remained firm, even as she felt her cheeks reddening. "What horse, girl?" asked one of the men, clearly enjoying the situation. "The black horse that's injured. I saw him being mistreated yesterday. I want to buy him." The silence that followed was broken by laughter. Emily felt her heart accelerate, but not from fear. It was a growing determination that invaded her, the same strength that made her wake up before sunrise to pick flowers in the field and sell them in the city. "Listen to this," said one of the employees to the others. "The girl wants to buy Thunder." "That horse that's no good for anything anymore," replied another. "He's been limping for weeks. The boss already said he's going to get rid of him soon." The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Get rid of him. She knew very well what that meant, even if no one had ever clearly explained it. Animals that were no longer useful simply disappeared, and no one talked about what happened afterward. "Please," she said, her voice now carrying an urgency that made the men stop laughing. "I have real money. Let me speak with the owner." The older employee in the group studied her for a moment. There was something in that child's posture, in the way she held that worn bag, that made him hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe pity, but he nodded. "All right, girl, but when you leave here crying, don't say we didn't warn you." Emily was led through perfectly maintained gardens, through corridors with marble flooring that reflected her small and determined image. Each step took her deeper into that world of luxury that she knew only from a distance. Bronze horse statues decorated the corners, and paintings of champion animals covered the walls. Finally, they reached a carved wooden door. The employee knocked and, after receiving permission, opened it slowly. The room was immense, with a meeting table in the center where 5 men in suits were discussing scattered documents. They all stopped talking when they saw the barefoot girl standing at the entrance. "What is the meaning of this, Carl?" asked a grey-haired man with a stern look, clearly the owner of the stables. "Mr. Harrison, this girl insists on speaking with you about buying a horse." The silence in the room was replaced by contained laughter. The men looked at each other as if they had just witnessed a particularly funny joke. But Emily didn't back down. She approached the table with small but determined steps. "My name is Emily, sir. I want to buy the black horse that's injured." Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, an ironic smile playing on his lips. "Ah, you want to buy Thunder? And how much do you have to offer, little one?" Emily placed the bag on the polished table and began to empty it. Coins of all sizes scattered, creating a metallic noise that echoed through the room. There were pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. There wasn't a single bill there. $143.70, she said, her clear voice cutting through the silence. I counted 3 times to be sure. The men observed the small mountain of coins, with expressions ranging from amusement to discomfort. There was something disturbing about that sight, in the amount of work that those small coins represented. Harrison picked up one of the coins and examined it. "And where did all this money come from?" "I sell flowers in the square. I wake up at dawn to pick them in Mr. Joe's field. He lets me in exchange for taking care of his chickens on Sundays. Then I take them to the city and spend all day selling." "This coin here," she picked up a quarter, "came from Mrs. Mary, who always buys a bouquet to take to church. And this one," she picked up a $1 coin, "was from the bank clerk, who said the flowers would brighten his wife's day." With each coin that Emily explained, the discomfort in the room grew. It wasn't just money there. It was the story of months of hard work, of a child who knew the value of every cent because she had to earn it with her own hands. "And why do you want this specific horse?" asked Harrison, his voice losing some of its mocking tone. "Because he's suffering and nobody cares. Yesterday I saw when the employee pulled him forcefully, even with his injured leg. He moaned in pain, but nobody stopped to help. They just pushed him into the stable." One of the men at the table cleared his throat uncomfortably. It was evident that they all knew exactly what Emily was talking about. Harrison was silent for a long moment, his gaze alternating between the scattered coins and the determined face of the girl. Finally, he stood up and walked to the window. That overlooked the stables. "That horse isn't worth even half of what you brought, child. He's finished. He's not even good for rides, let alone competitions. He's just an old, broken animal." "But he still feels pain," Emily replied simply. "And if he feels pain, then he still matters." The phrase echoed in the room like a bell. Harrison turned to look at the girl again, and for an instant, something in the depths of his eyes seemed to soften, but the expression lasted only a second before he regained his composure. "All right," he said, returning to his chair. "I accept your offer. $143.70 for Thunder, but with conditions. You take the animal today, and you never set foot here." "Again, deal!" Emily felt her heart race. It was real. It was happening. She nodded vigorously, unable to find words to express the joy that exploded inside her. Harrison called Carl and instructed him to prepare the transfer papers. Meanwhile, Emily carefully gathered each coin, putting them back in the bag. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from an emotion so intense that she could barely contain it. When the documents were ready, she held them as if they were the most precious treasure in the world. In a sense, they were. They represented the first time in her life that she had managed to change something, that her voice had been heard and her determination rewarded. "Carl will take you to the stable," said Harrison. "You have until sunset to leave the property with the animal." As she walked toward the stables, Emily felt her legs wobble with nervousness and anticipation. Soon she would see again the horse that had touched her so deeply, but this time not as a powerless spectator of his suffering, this time as his new owner, his protector, his hope for a better life. What she didn't know was that the next steps would be just the beginning of a journey that would transform not only her life, but that of her entire family and many other people around. The echo of the coin still resonated in the meeting room, carrying with it the promise that sometimes the simplest gestures can move mountains. The smell of hay and leather permeated the air when Emily entered the stable. Her bare feet stepped carefully on the packed dirt floor, while her eyes adapted to the dimness of the place. Carl walked in front of her, making impatient noises with his tongue, as if he was wasting precious time with that absurd situation. "There's your treasure," said the employee with irony, pointing to a stall at the back of the stable. Emily followed in the indicated direction, and her heart tightened when she finally saw Thunder up close. The horse was even thinner than she remembered, his ribs visible under the dark coat that had lost its shine. His right hind leg was slightly raised, avoiding putting weight on the ground. His eyes, large and expressive, seemed to carry all the weariness of the world. When the animal saw her approaching, he instinctively backed away, pressing his back against the stall wall. It was evident that he expected more brutality, more shouting, more pain. Emily immediately stopped, extending her empty hand toward him. "Hi, beautiful boy," she murmured with the softest voice she could find. "I'm Emily. I've come to take you home with me." Thunder observed her cautiously, his nostrils dilating to catch her scent. There was something different about this small child, something he hadn't felt for a long time. It wasn't fear, it wasn't aggressiveness. It was a strange combination of gentleness and determination that confused him. Carl snorted impatiently. "He won't come out easily. This horse is getting more difficult to handle every day. Just yesterday he tried to bite Jim when he went to clean the stall." "He's just scared," Emily replied, without taking her eyes off the animal. "Anyone would be like that if they were treated badly for so long." She approached one more step, moving slowly as she had seen birds do when they approach breadcrumbs. Thunder tensed his muscles, ready to back away even more, but something in the girl's posture made him hesitate. "I know you're in pain." She continued talking, her voice creating a calming melody in the tense environment. "I've felt pain too. When my dad lost his job and we had nothing to eat, it hurt so much in here," she touched her chest, "that I thought I was going to die. But we didn't die. We found a way. We always find a way." Carl rolled his eyes, but there was something about the scene that made him stay there, watching. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe something deeper that he didn't want to admit. Thunder lowered his head slightly, as if he was trying to understand that voice that spoke to him in a way he hadn't heard for a long time. Emily extended her hand even further, almost touching his muzzle. "Can I pet you?" The question was directed at the horse, but Carl couldn't hold back a laugh. "Girl, he doesn't understand what you're saying. He's just an animal." Emily turned to him with a seriousness that contrasted with her 7 years of age. "Of course, he understands. Maybe not the words, but he feels. He feels when someone wants to hurt him, and he feels when someone wants to help him." As if to prove her point, Thunder took a small step in her direction. It was a hesitant movement, full of distrust, but it was a movement toward her. Emily smiled, and for the first time since she had entered the stables, she felt that everything would be all right. Slowly, very slowly, she touched the horse's muzzle. The skin was soft and warm, and she felt his breath against her palm. Thunder trembled slightly at the contact but didn't move away. "There, boy. Now you're mine, and I'm yours. We'll take care of each other, okay?" Carl cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, now you need to get him out of here. I have other things to do." The reality of the situation hit Emily like a bucket of cold water. How would she take Thunder home? It was miles away, and the horse was clearly having difficulty walking. She didn't have a proper rope. She didn't have experience in leading. As such large animals, she had nothing but her determination. "How do I take him?" she asked, trying to hide the growing panic in her voice. "That's your problem now," replied Carl, already heading out of the stable. "I can only lend you an old rope that's there in the corner. The rest is up to you." Emily looked at the rope that Carl had indicated. It was thick and rough, clearly used many times before. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. She picked it up and went back to Thunder. "It's going to be a long walk, my friend, but we can do it. I know we can." Putting the rope around the horse's neck was easier than she had imagined. Thunder seemed to understand that this was his chance to leave that place and cooperated more than resisted. When Emily led him out of the stall, he limped visibly, but followed her steps. The sunlight blinded them momentarily when they left the stable. Emily blinked several times, adjusting her eyes to the brightness, and it was then that she noticed they weren't alone. Several employees of the stables had gathered to watch the spectacle of the barefoot girl trying to take away a lame horse. "I bet she won't even make it to the gate," said one of them. "Poor child, she'll regret it before she gets home," commented another. Emily felt her cheeks redden but raised her chin with determination. She wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing her give up. She began to walk toward the exit, with Thunder by her side. The first steps were difficult. The horse clearly felt pain with each movement of his right leg, and Emily needed to stop, frequently for him to rest. At each stop, she heard giggles and comments from the employees who observed them from a distance. But there was something magical happening between the girl and the animal. With each step they took together, an invisible bond strengthened. Thunder began to trust more in that soft voice that encouraged him, and Emily learned to read the signs of fatigue and pain in his movements. When they finally passed through the stable gate, Emily felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had overcome the first obstacle, but the real challenge was just beginning. Before her stretched the dusty road that led to her house, and she knew they still had a long way to go. The sun was high in the sky when they began the journey. Back, Emily mentally calculated that it would take at least 3 hours to get home, maybe more considering Thunder's condition. She didn't have water. She didn't have food. She had nothing but her unwavering determination. With each mile traveled, the mutual trust between them grew. Thunder began to lower his guard, allowing Emily to touch him more freely, to caress his neck when he needed to rest. The girl, in turn, developed an almost magical intuition to understand when he needed to stop, when he could continue, when the pain was more intense. Halfway there, they met Mr. Joe, the owner of the field where Emily picked flowers. The elderly man was fixing a fence when he saw them approaching on the road. "Emily," he called, incredulous, "what are you doing with that horse?" The girl stopped and smiled at her old friend. "I bought him, Mr. Joe, with the flower money." Joe approached, evaluating Thunder with experienced eyes. He had raised horses in the past, before financial problems forced him to sell them all. "Girl, this animal is very debilitated. He needs urgent care." "I know," Emily replied. "That's why I took him out of that place. Nobody was taking proper care of him there." Joe observed the determination in the child's eyes and felt something stir in his chest. It had been a long time since he had seen so much courage in someone so young. "You need water," he said, disappearing for a moment and returning with a full bucket. "And you, girl, need to eat something. This walk is going to be long." While Thunder drank water eagerly, Joe offered Emily a piece of bread and a banana. The girl accepted gratefully, realizing only at that moment how hungry she was. "Does your family know what you did?" asked the man. Emily shook her head, chewing slowly. "Not yet, but when they see Thunder, they'll understand." "And if they don't understand?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Emily knew that her parents wouldn't be happy. They could barely feed the children they had, let alone a horse, but something inside her said it was the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. "They'll understand," she repeated more to herself than to Joe. "They have to understand." The old man observed her for a long moment, seeing in her a reflection of his own youth, when he still believed that love and determination could move mountains. "All right, girl. But if you need help, you know where to find me." Emily thanked him and said goodbye, resuming the journey with Thunder by her side. The animal seemed a little more animated after drinking water and resting, but still limped visibly. The sun was beginning to lower on the horizon when they finally spotted the small wooden house where Emily lived with her family. It was a simple construction, with only 3 rooms, surrounded by a small plot of land where her mother planted some vegetables. Emily felt her heart accelerate. In a few minutes, she would have to face her parents' reaction. She would have to explain how she spent all the money they had earned together. She would have to convince them that she had done the right thing. But when she looked at Thunder by her side, she felt a strange peace take over her chest. No matter what happened, she had saved a life. She had taken that magnificent animal out of a place where he suffered and brought him to where he could have a chance to be happy again. And that, she knew deep in her heart, was worth any consequence that might come. The sound of pots in the kitchen stopped abruptly when Rose saw her daughter approaching the house with a limping horse beside her. The 40-year-old woman, prematurely grey hair and hands calloused from so much work, let out a sigh that mixed disbelief and despair. "My God in heaven, Emily! What have you done?" Rose's voice echoed across the yard, alerting her husband, who was at the back of the house trying to fix a broken pipe. Jack emerged from under the improvised sink, with his shirt dirty with mud, and an expression of tiredness that quickly transformed into alarm when he saw the scene in front of the house. "Emily Marie Smith," he shouted, using his daughter's full name as he always did when he was very angry. "Explain to me right now what this is." The two younger children, Peter, 5 years old, and Amy, 3, appeared running at the door, their eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. They had never seen a horse so close, and for a moment they forgot the tension that hung in the air. Emily stopped in the middle of the yard, still holding the rope that led Thunder. The horse, exhausted from the long walk, lowered his head and breathed heavily. The girl knew that this would be the most difficult moment of her entire journey. "Dad, Mum, this is Thunder," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "I bought him with the flower money." The silence that followed was so heavy that even the birds seemed to stop singing. Jack walked slowly toward his daughter, and Emily could see the vein popping in his forehead, an unmistakable sign that a storm was forming. "You did what?" His voice came out low, controlled, but charged with a contained fury that scared even Thunder. "Dad, the animal was suffering. Nobody was taking proper care of him. He was suffering," Jack exploded, making Thunder take a step back. "And you don't think we're suffering? You spent all the money we saved for months on an animal that can't even walk properly." Rose approached, her face red with indignation. "Emily, how could you do such a thing? That money was to buy medicine for Amy when she got sick again. It was to buy school supplies for you all. It was to survive," Jack completed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of despair. "And you brought another mouth to feed." Her parents' words hit Emily like stones, but she didn't let go of the rope. Instead, she positioned herself slightly in front of Thunder, as if she wanted to protect him from the anger that hung in the air. "He's not just another mouth to feed," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "He's a living being who needs help, just like us." Jack laughed bitterly. "Living being? Emily, we can barely feed the 3 of you. Where do you think we're going to get money for feed, medicine, vet? Where?" "We'll find a way," she replied, echoing the words she always heard from her parents when things got tough. "We always find a way." "Find a way?" Rose shook her head, tears of frustration shining in her eyes. "Girl, you have no idea what you've done. You don't know what it's like to wake up at night thinking about how you're going to put food on the table the next day." "Yes, I do," Emily shouted, surprising everyone with the intensity of her voice. "I do, because I was there selling flowers, under sun and rain to help. I do because I see when Dad comes home downcast because he couldn't find work. I do because I hear Mom crying softly when she thinks we're asleep." The silence that followed was different from the previous one. It was no longer just tension. It was the painful recognition of a truth that everyone knew, but no one openly talked about. Peter and Amy approached Thunder timidly, fascinated by the large, gentle animal. The horse, sensing the children's innocence, lowered his head, allowing them to touch him. "He's pretty," whispered Amy, passing her small hand over Thunder's muzzle. "And big," added Peter, his eyes shining with admiration. Rose observed the scene and felt something stir in her chest. It had been a long time since she had seen her younger children so enchanted with something, but practical reality soon took over again. "Emily, even if I wanted to accept this, we don't have the means. Look at the state of this animal. He needs a vet, medicine, special food. We don't even have enough for ourselves. Jack walked around Thunder, evaluating the animal with eyes that once understood horses, before life forced him to abandon that dream. Besides, he said, stopping in front of his daughter, where do you plan to put him? We barely have a yard for the children to play in. Emily looked around the small plot of land and had to admit that her father was right. There was no stable, no adequate pasture, no infrastructure whatsoever to keep a horse. We'll improvise, she said, but her voice no longer sounded as convinced as before. Improvise how, Emily? Rose approached, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders. With what wood are we going to make a shelter? With what money are we going to buy materials? Did you think about this before making that decision? For the first time since she had made the decision to buy Thunder, Emily felt doubts infiltrating her determination. Maybe her parents were right. Maybe she had just been a dreamy child who didn't understand the realities of adult life. But then Thunder rested his muzzle on her shoulder, a gentle gesture of trust that reminded her why she had done all this. She looked into the animal's large, sad eyes and saw the same desperation that she sometimes saw on her father's face when the money ran out. "Mom," she said, turning to Rose, "remember when Dad lost his job at the factory and you said we would get through it together as a family?" Rose nodded hesitantly. "Remember when Amy got sick and we didn't have money for the doctor, but you didn't give up until you got treatment at the health clinic?" "Yes, but..." "And remember when the roof started leaking and Dad said he didn't have money to fix it, but he still climbed up there every night for a week until he managed to patch the holes?" Jack frowned, beginning to understand where his daughter was going. That's different, Emily. Those things were necessary. And Thunder isn't," she asked. "Dad, you always said we have to help those in need when we can, that a person is only worth something if they know how to take care of those who are weaker." Her daughter's words echoed in Jack's mind like an echo of his own upbringing, of the values that his father had taught him and that he tried to pass on to his children. Rose sighed deeply. "Emily, one thing is to help people. Another thing is to bring a large sick animal to our home when we barely have the means to—" "1 week," Emily interrupted, her voice carrying a maturity that surprised her parents. "Give me 1 week to prove that we can take care of him. If in 1 week he's not better, if we can't handle it, I'll take him back myself." Jack and Rose looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. They knew their daughter well enough to know that she wouldn't give up easily, but they also knew that the situation was unsustainable. "And how do you plan to feed him?" asked Jack. "With what money?" "I'll sell more flowers. I'll work more hours. I'll ask Mr. Joe for help. He said if I needed—" "Emily," Rose interrupted her, "you can't carry this responsibility alone. You're 7 years old." "Then help me," the girl pleaded, tears finally beginning to form in her eyes. "Please, I know we don't have much, but we have love. And sometimes, love is more important than money." Peter approached his father and pulled on his shirt. "Dad, can the horse stay? He looks sad." Amy joined her brother. "Please, Dad, he's beautiful." Jack looked at his 3 children, his wife, the horse that was breathing heavily beside his eldest daughter. His entire adult life had been a sequence of practical decisions, of choices based on necessity and survival. But there, at that moment, he was being confronted with something different. 1 week, he finally said, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "Just 1 week, Emily. If in 1 week this animal isn't visibly better, if we can't handle it, he goes back to where he came from." Emily felt her heart explode with joy. 1 week is all I need." Rose shook her head, but there was something in her eyes that was no longer just resistance. "And where is he going to stay tonight?" "We'll improvise a shelter with the old boards that are in the back," Jack said, already unconsciously assuming the role of responsible for the situation. "Tomorrow morning we'll see what else needs to be done." Emily ran to hug her father, then her mother, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Thunder observed the scene with his large eyes, as if understanding that something important had happened. As the sun set on the horizon, the Smith family gathered in the yard, improvising a shelter for their newest member. Even with all the uncertainties and difficulties that lay ahead, there was something new in the air of that house. It was the feeling that perhaps some miracles were possible when people decided to fight for them together. The first rays of sun had barely touched the yard when Emily was already up, observing Thunder in the improvised shelter that the family had built the night before. The horse had managed to lie down during the night, a sign that he finally felt safe enough to rest completely. During the week that followed, the routine of the Smith family changed completely. Emily woke up before dawn to take care of Thunder, checking if he had drunk water, if the wound on his leg wasn't worse, if he needed anything. Then she would go to pick and sell flowers with renewed determination, knowing that every cent earned now had an even more urgent purpose. Mr. Joe, true to his promise to help, showed up almost every day with something useful. Some hay, vegetable scraps that could serve as food, advice on how to care for a debilitated animal. The elderly man had developed a special affection for the situation, seeing in it an echo of his own passion for horses. "This animal has something special," he said to Jack one afternoon, as they watched Thunder eat grass with renewed appetite. "Look at how he behaves. He's not an ordinary horse." Jack, who had initially resisted the idea, began to notice small things that caught his attention. The intelligence in Thunder's eyes, the way he responded to Emily's voice commands, the natural elegance of his movements even with his injured leg. "Do you think he was once a competition horse?" asked Jack. Joe approached the animal and carefully examined his neck. "There's a mark here that I hadn't noticed before. It looks like the type of mark they make on registered horses." Intrigued, the elderly man decided to investigate further. The next day, he brought with him a small, strange device that Emily had never seen before. "It's a microchip reader," explained Joe. "Some valuable horses have these chips implanted for identification." When he passed the device over Thunder's neck, the equipment emitted a beep. Joe looked at the small screen and his eyes widened. "My God. Emily, do you know what horse you bought?" The girl shook her head, her heart accelerating with the expression of astonishment on the elderly man's face. "This is Black Lightning, regional champion from 3 years ago. He was worth a fortune, girl. He simply disappeared from the circuit after a series of poor performances that no one could explain." The revelation fell like a bomb on the Smith family. Rose, who was hanging clothes on the clothesline, let the pieces fall to the ground. "Are you saying our Emily bought a champion horse for $143? She asked, incredulous. Joe nodded gravely. "And I suspect that someone at the stables knew exactly what they were doing when they agreed to sell him for that price." The discovery changed everything. Joe contacted a veterinarian friend, Dr. Morgan, who agreed to examine Thunder without charging for the initial services, motivated by curiosity about the case. The examination revealed that the animal had been systematically poisoned with small doses of a substance that caused weakness and pain in the joints. With proper treatment, recovery would be not only possible but likely. "Someone wanted this horse to lose its capabilities," explained Dr. Morgan to the gathered family. "Probably to justify selling him for a low price. It's more common than you imagine in the world of competitions." Jack felt anger growing in his chest. "So they hurt the animal on purpose?" "It seems so, but you arrived in time. With care, affection, and the correct treatment, Black Lightning can return to being the champion he always was." The weeks that followed were of transformation not only for Thunder, but for the entire Smith family. The horse's treatment brought expenses, but it also brought something unexpected: unity. Rose discovered that she had a knack for cooking the special foods that Thunder needed, mixing cheap ingredients creatively to create nutritious meals. Jack, using skills he hadn't exercised for years, built a proper stable with wood donated by neighbors who had become interested in the story. Peter and Amy became Emily's dedicated assistants, helping to brush Thunder, change his water, keep the stable clean. The presence of the horse brought a new joy to the house, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. But it was Emily who continued to be the heart of the entire operation. Her connection with Thunder was almost mystical. She seemed to instinctively understand when he was in pain, when he was improving, when he needed affection or space. 1 month after Thunder's arrival, Joe brought news that would change their lives forever. "Emily," he said with a smile he couldn't hide, "how about we enter Thunder in next month's regional competition?" "Competition?" she asked, her eyes shining. If he's really recovering his capabilities, it would be a way to prove what was done to him. And also, Joe hesitated for a moment. The prize for the winner is considerable. The family gathered that night to discuss the possibility. It was risky. Thunder was still in recovery, and a competition could be dangerous if he wasn't completely healed. But if he wins, said Rose, it wouldn't just be about the money, it would be about justice. Jack nodded, and it would be about proving that people can make a difference even when they start with almost nothing. Dr. Morgan was consulted and gave his cautious approval. Thunder was responding well to the treatment and had recovered much of his strength and agility. The training began the next day. Joe, who had been a jockey in his youth, took on the responsibility of preparing both Thunder and Emily for the competition. A competition isn't just about speed, he explained to the girl. It's about mutual trust, about understanding each other without needing words. Emily absorbed each lesson like a sponge. She learned to read Thunder's signals, to adjust her posture in the saddle, to communicate her intentions through subtle touches and body movements. The horse, in turn, seemed to be reborn each day. His coat regained its shine, his muscles strengthened, and most importantly of all, confidence returned to his eyes. In the 2 weeks leading up to the competition, the entire local community mobilized. Neighbors contributed with borrowed equipment, others offered transportation, some simply showed up to cheer and give moral support. The story of Emily and Thunder had spread throughout the region, touching hearts and inspiring people who had long lost faith in everyday miracles. On the day of the competition, nervousness took hold of the Smith family. They had arrived at the regional racetrack in a borrowed truck, with Thunder calm and Emily visibly anxious. "Remember what we talked about," Joe said to the girl as she prepared. "The result doesn't matter. You've already won the moment you decided to fight together." The competition brought together the best horses in the region, including several from Hope Stables itself. Harrison was present, and Emily could feel his uncomfortable gaze upon her. When it was time for the race, Emily mounted Thunder with her heart beating strongly. The horse, however, was serene, as if he understood exactly what needed to be done. The 4. A start was given, and for a few seconds Thunder stayed behind, observing, calculating. Then, as if an old memory awakened in his muscles, he began to accelerate. The crowd shouted when they saw the horse that had been discarded as useless begin to overtake competitors one by one. Emily remained calm, following Joe's instructions, allowing Thunder to find his own rhythm. In the final stretch, only 2 horses disputed the lead. Thunder and Royal Cyclone, the current regional champion, ridden by the professional jockey from Hope Stables. It was then that something magical happened. Emily felt Thunder gather strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul. The horse accelerated as if he had wings, crossing the finish line ahead in front of the second place finisher. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds before exploding into shouts of joy from the crowd. Emily had won her first competition riding the horse she had saved with her flower coins. Harrison approached after the award ceremony, his face red with embarrassment. "Girl," he said, I would like to make an offer. I'll buy the horse. Back for 10 times what you paid." Emily looked at Thunder, then at her family approaching with radiant smiles, and finally at Harrison. "Thank you for the offer, sir," she said politely, "but Thunder is not for sale. He's family now." With the prize money from the competition and the money from sponsorships that began to appear, the Smith family was able to not only improve their living conditions, but also transform their property into a small rehabilitation center for mistreated horses. The story of Emily and Thunder spread beyond the region, inspiring other people to believe that simple gestures of love and determination can create extraordinary changes. Years later, when Emily was already a young woman and Thunder a respected horse in the world of competitions, she still remembered that morning when she counted her coins at the stables. She remembered how her heart beat strongly when she decided that some things in life are worth more than money, and that true love always finds a way to flourish, even in the most arid terrains. Thunder was never just a horse. He became a symbol that sometimes saving someone is actually a way of saving yourself. And that the most beautiful miracles happen when brave hearts decide to believe in the impossible. The end, dear listeners. We hope that the story of Emily and Thunder has touched your hearts the same way it touched ours. This is a narrative about courage, unconditional love, and the transformative power of compassion. To continue following equally moving and inspiring stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell. Leave a like if this story made you believe a little more in the magic of small gestures, and tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most. Every day we bring new stories that celebrate the beauty of life and the strength of the human spirit. Until the next adventure, and remember, sometimes all we need to change the world